Spirit Fitness CT800 Treadmill with medical handrails, assembly instructions. First thing you're going to do is to unpack the box. You'll just need to take the top off and then take all of the styrofoam and all of the loose pieces out, and then unwrap everything from the plastic bags and remove the cardboard box from underneath it, and then you can begin assembly. In this step, we're going to install the console mast tubes. The right console mast tube has a computer cable pre-installed. You'll want to lift the tube off of the walking surface and attach it to the base frame. You need to be very gentle as you're lining up the upright tube and taking the slack out of that cable. You don't want it to get pinched between the tube and the base frame. After you've done that, you'll want to grab 3 split washers and 3 bolts, and then the retaining plate, you'll put the retaining plate in and then put the bolts in over that. Just make sure right now you don't do that too tightly. You'll want to have a little bit of slack in that for later when you're putting the console support on top. You'll want to repeat the same process with the retaining plate and bolts on the opposite side. Just make sure to tighten these just well enough to hold this in place, and you'll come back in and tighten these down more firmly later. To install the console support, we'll need to mount the interface brackets to the underside of the console. You'll want to make sure that these brackets are slid all the way to the back of the console before tightening the bolts. There will be 3 bolts for each one of these mounting interface brackets. Next thing we want to do is to slide the console support onto the console mast tubes. On that right side, we want to make sure that we connect the computer cable and make sure that nothing is pinching in there. Then we can finish attaching the console support to the top of the console mast tubes with the 6 bolts, split washers, and flat washers. Just again, be careful to make sure that you don't pinch the computer cable. After tightening the console support down to the console mast tubes, you can go back in and tighten the bolts at the bottom of the console mast tubes by the retaining plate now that all of these are in place. Up next, we'll be removing the short handrails. To do this, you'll need to remove all of the self-tapping screws from off the sides and backs and underneath the console support. After removing all the self-tapping screws, we'll need to remove the 2 bolts and flat washers and lock washers that hold the short handrails in place and set them aside. You'll want to make sure to repeat the same process on the opposite side. Up next, we'll be installing the extended handrails. First thing we'll have to do this is to install the handrail upright tubes. We'll want to make sure that we install the handrail upright tubes to the underside of the treadmill frame with 3 button head socket bolts, 3 split washers, and 3 flat washers on each side. You'll want to make sure that you don't tighten these fully yet. That way you have some slack when you do put the extended handrails into place. Up next, we'll be attaching the side handrails. You can attach them to the front and the rear attachment sides, and then you can secure the front and the rear, both with the button head bolts, split washers, and flat washers. Once you get to the back sides, there will be some on the inside and on the outside. You'll repeat this on both the left and right rails. After installing the extended handrails, go back in and tighten the bolts underneath the treadmill to make sure that the handrail upright tubes are secure. Up next, we'll need to reattach the beverage holder plastics on both sides of the console support. You can do that with all of the self-tapping screws that were removed earlier. In this last step, we're going to attach the console and the covers. First thing we're going to want to do is to attach the ground cable to the hole in the steel frame with a screw and a star washer. After doing that, we'll want to attach the computer cables and the hand pulse cables. Then we can mount the console to the handlebar frame with 2 screws in the upper set of holes and 2 screws in the lower set of holes. We can finish the assembly by attaching the lower side caps with 4 screws, 2 in each cap.